Good morning, church. Welcome to online church. It's great to be with you this morning. I hope you've all had a lovely summer, a lovely August, and there's still plenty of the summer left to go. It's my honour really to bring the word this morning to you. And I'm just going to read, before I start really, I'm going to read a psalm, probably the most well-known psalm. My title for this morning is The Window Seat, or The Best Seat in the House. It could be either of those. The window seat, ... the best seat in the house. And I'm going to read Psalm 23. Now I know it's a psalm that we all know really, really well, but I'm going to read it from the Amplified version, which isn't very different, but just a little bit. So it says this, Psalm 23, "The Lord is my shepherd, to feed, to guide, and to shield me. I shall not want. He lets me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still and quiet waters. He refreshes and restores my soul," or my life. "He leads me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod, which is to protect, and your staff, which is to guide, they comfort and console me." This is the verse that I want to concentrate on this morning. Verse 5. "You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You have anointed and refreshed my head with oil, and my cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy and unfailing love shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell forever throughout all of my days in the house and in the presence of the Lord." Okay, so that's the psalm. I'm going to put this down and then I can just get on. So that verse 5, "You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies." Now, I absolutely love going out for mainly coffee and cake. And I always say I'm not a sweet tooth person. I like my savoury stuff, but I've got a favourite little coffee shop that my daughter Hannah introduced me to a long time ago now, and it's called Cake Stories. And it's only a small little quirky cake and coffee shop, and it's quite it's like adorable really, but it's really small, and it's only got a few tables in. And since COVID happened, they took a few of those tables out, so you really are limited to your tables. But there's one table, and it's right in the window, and it's like the table that everybody wants. So if you get there and that table's free and you sit at it, or you think you're great, and it's got a sign on the table. It's like a little blackboard, and it's written out, and it says, "Congratulations, you got the best seat in the shop." And I just love that, and I just really love that thought, and it just triggered some thoughts for what I'm going to speak about today. Verse 5 says, "You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies." I've got a few points that I'm going to come through today, just very, very quickly. And the first point is, who is sitting at your table? Okay, who is sitting at your table? So I like going out for a meal, and when there was that time when you couldn't go out for meals and you were very restricted, I think since restrictions were lifted, it's been lovely to have that freedom again. But when I go out for a meal, it's quite, within our family, honestly, they laugh at me, but I like to sit at a round table. Right, and there's a reason for that. And my family laugh at me and they'll go, "Oh, she likes a round table." And I remember one year it was my birthday and we booked a table, and when I rang up the restaurant, I said, "I know you might think I'm being funny, but have you got a round table?" And they said, yes, we'll make sure you get the round table. And when we got there, we didn't get the round table. And the reason I like a round table is because you're all seated round and you can talk to each other. And on a rectangular table, I always feel like there's somebody right at the end who maybe feels a little bit left out. So when we go for a meal, if there's not a round table, I'm the one who kind of pushes everybody around, or tries to, so that they can all talk, and I don't mind sitting on the end because I'm quite good at multitasking and I can listen and talk. But sometimes there are situations when we can't actually choose the table that we sit at, and you can't choose who you sit with. It's nice, isn't it, to go out and be able to be with people who you love and or at least you like, and and be able to sit together. But sometimes you can't choose where you sit, and you can't choose who you sit with. But that verse in Psalm 23, it says, "You prepare a table in the presence of your enemies." Dear me. You think, what? In the presence of my enemies? I don't want to be sat with people who are my enemies. That's not what we would choose, is it? We wouldn't naturally choose to sit at a table full of our enemies. Who is at your table? Who is at your table? I mean, would you choose naturally to sit with a group of people who disliked you? You wouldn't really, would you? If there's, people who've hurt you and caused you pain, you wouldn't naturally choose to go and sit at that table. Like, no way, I mean, I've sat at a few awkward tables in my time. When we've been to kind of round table events, people think I'm a chatty person because I am. I'll talk to anybody, but I'm quite shy with people I don't know. And so find it quite awkward being sat at a table with people who I'm just completely unfamiliar with. And so I wouldn't necessarily choose to do that, but sometimes we have to do that. It's much easier, isn't it, to sit at a table with friends, people who like you and who you like. But God prepared a table in the presence of our enemies. Why has he done that? One thing I do know, I don't always understand it, but I do know that when you are seated at a difficult situation, God is with you. He's seated there with you at the table. You're not on your own. You are seated with God. He's next to you. He's there to protect you from any harm. Keep God close, church. That's what I would say. Keep God close. Your enemies can't harm you when God's this close to you. Don't leave a gap. Pull your chair right next to the chair that God's on. He's at that table with you. Don't leave a gap. And be careful who you choose to sit at your table. Be careful who you choose. You want to sit with those who are going to, I would say, want the best for you. That's a good thing, isn't it? To sit at a table with people who are looking out for you, for people who will build you up, for people who will encourage you. That's one of my biggest things. You don't want to be sat next to people in your life at this table that God's prepared who are going to put you down and discourage. You want to sit at the table with people who will cheer you on when you need it, okay? So that was point 1. Point 2, what is on your table? Now this is important, isn't it? Psalm 23 verse 5, the last little bit said, "My cup overflows." Your table that God has prepared for you is full to overflowing with God's goodness. Absolutely full. When I make a cup of coffee or a cup of tea at home, I like it almost full. But my husband, for some reason, likes a gap at the top. But the cup that God has prepared for us, it's not only full, it's actually overflowing. Have you ever done that before? Sometimes I like my drinks piping hot, red hot, right? So sometimes I'll make a drink and within a few minutes, I think that's not hot enough. So if you've made a coffee, particularly a milky coffee, and you put it in the microwave and you forget and you put it on too long and it actually overflows, well, that's what God's cup is like for us. It's not just full, half full. It's not even just full to the brim. It is full to overflowing. Your table is piled high with a feast bigger and better than you could ever imagine. A feast, not just a snack. You know, I love a good feast. I absolutely love when you can go and you can just like pick what you want and have as much as you want. Now, some people that's a nightmare, but for me, that is the best, right? You know, but Psalm 23 verse 5 in the Message version of the Bible, it says, you prepare a 6-course dinner. Wow, can you imagine that? A 6-course dinner. What I want to point out this morning is just that, you know, God can prepare a feast in your season of famine. You might feel as if you are in a season that is quite like a famine at the moment and you can't see the feast, but God has a feast prepared for you. You know, he has a feast so big that you'll be bursting at the seams with his goodness. You'll be absolutely exploding with his kindness, his generosity, his love, his protection, his faithfulness, and his blessings. You know, when we were younger, my sister, if we went out for a meal, she didn't think she'd had our money's worth unless she felt physically sick when she'd finished because she'd eaten so much. And that's the kind of feast that God has prepared for us. He's prepared more than we could ever imagine. You know, God wants to refresh you and he wants to lift up your head. Choose to fill your table with the good things that God's prepared for you. Do you know, I discovered this programme from my daughter and son-in-law from Hannah and Callum. They recommended this programme on Netflix called Somebody Feed Phil. Oh, well, I found a programme I totally love, right? They'd been watching it and they said, oh, I think you'll enjoy this. It's absolutely brilliant. And it's a guy who is a TV writer and a producer. He's American and he's called Phil Rosenthal. If you have a minute and a spare hour to watch, catch one of these programmes. They're absolutely brilliant if you like food and you like travel. And so what he does, he travels around America and some other parts of the world, but they're mainly based in America, travels around the cities, and what a job he's got. He tastes the local food. Oh man, honestly, I mean, some of it's not what I would like, but a lot of it's what I would love. And so he goes around and he goes to various different restaurants and tastes the food. And honestly, what a good job to have. I mean, I'd be in my element if that's what I had to do. And at the end of each episode, Phil kind of links up, he either calls or Zooms or whatever, FaceTimes his family members. And he just talks about his food experiences of the day, you know. And what he said, this guy called Phil, what he said was sometimes even better than actually eating the food is talking about the food. That's what he enjoys. Now, I'm right up his street. That's just what I like doing. So he likes talking about it. He likes describing it and appreciating it. You know, it's good to talk, isn't it, about good things. It's good to talk. But I want to just say today, it's good to talk about the good things that God's given us, that God has done for us. You know, it's good to encourage and it's good to build each other up. It made us think, if there was a TV programme called Somebody Feed Joy, what would I be talking about? What would I be sharing about? And I don't necessarily mean food. I mean from God. You know, what am I being fed from God and what am I feeding you and encouraging you? You know, what would I be sharing about what God has provided at my table? It's just something to think about, isn't it? Point number 3, moving on quickly. Point number 3 is, where is your table? Where is your table? Another really one of my favourite verses, and it's a very, very well-known verse, is from Psalm 92, verse 13. And it says, planted in the house, they will flourish. Planted in the house, they will flourish. Where is your table? Psalm 23, your table is where you are planted. Okay? Are you planted in the house? Are you planted in the place that God has put you? You know, God has placed all of his gifts for us right there on our table. They're right there for us to access. It's up to us to access them. He's planted us sometimes in front of our enemies. You know, that's not something that we always like to think about, but he has. But one thing is for sure and for certain. You don't need to be afraid when God's with you. You were planted there, but you don't need to be afraid to run away and hide, because sat right next to you at your table is God. You know, sometimes our grandchildren, when they come and they sit next to you, they literally sit next to you. It's like glue, like stuck to you. They're just like, and that's what God's like. He's just like our grandchildren. He's like Caleb and Faith, who are just sat, stuck to you, right? Stuck to your side. And because of that, the enemy can't get in. You might be sat surrounded by your enemies, but they cannot affect you. They can't harm you, because God is sat right at your table with you. You know, I think all I'm talking about this morning is food, but it kind of is really. But it was my birthday. I had quite a big birthday. I was 30 times 2 a few weeks ago. And another one of my favourite places, I love going out for afternoon tea, right? And so one of my favourite things to do, and I did a couple of afternoon teas over my birthday period. So one of them, we go to a little place in Northumberland called the Running Fox. Oh man, they do the best afternoon tea. And normally, it's another place that Hannah has introduced us to. And so normally Hannah or Grace would book, because you book online. And I am not very good with online things, right? I don't even shop online. I do, but Grace, my youngest daughter, has to order everything for me because I'm not the best. So anyway, but this time I decided I'm going to take my girls. So I was going to take Hannah and Grace and Becky, my daughter-in-law, and we were going to go out to celebrate my big birthday for afternoon tea. But the responsibility came down to me, because I didn't really tell them about it at first. I booked it. Well, I booked it online. And then I got a bit anxious, because normally you get an email back to say that you've booked. Well, I didn't. This email didn't appear. I did find it about 2 weeks later. It was in junk emails. I hadn't looked there. But I thought I hadn't got this email. So I thought, right, I'm going to have to ring them. Double check that, I've booked this table for afternoon tea. So I rang them. And the lady who answered the phone, she said, "Oh, don't you worry, your booking's here. It's all set for 4 of you." And she said, "Are you coming for a particular reason? Are you coming?" And I said, "Oh, well, it's my birthday, and so we're coming for my birthday." "Oh," she said, "right, I'm going to move your table. I'm going to give you the best table that we've got. I'm going to give you the best table." And so she said, "The one that you've got's all right, but you're celebrating something. You deserve to have a good table. I'm giving you the window table," right? The window table. So by now, I'm thinking the window table's quite a good table to be sat in, isn't it? The best seat in the house. And so anyway, we got there and we had this lovely table in the window and had a great time. Where is your table? Where is your table? Is it in a good place? Do you feel like you're tucked around the corner out of view? No. It's right where God has planted you. That's where your table is. That's where your table is. Right where God has planted you. In our house, we have a big corner sofa and then a chair. And this chair is kind of in our bay window, a little bit, kind of in the bay window. And we call it Papa's chair, because that's where Papa sits. And so he sits in that chair. Whoa, we don't sit in that chair if Papa's in the house, right? I mean, if he's not in the house and we sit there, we think, oh, got the best chair in the house. But our grandchildren, when they arrive at the house, they have a race to sit on Papa's chair. Anyway, they were here yesterday. They were with us yesterday, and we had them obviously they came into the house and they're saying, I'm going to sit on Papa's chair, I'm going to sit on Papa's chair. So they're racing to sit on Papa's chair, the window, it's in the window. And both jumped on it and Papa came in and he just said, right, I'm just going to sit down. He sat on top of them, right on top of them. And I took some photographs and I wish I could show you them now. But you know what? It just made me smile. Papa's chair, the chair in the bay window, the best chair in the house. God has got you seated at the best table in the house. The best chair and the best table. Coming to a close in a minute, I'm coming to point 4, which is point number 4, stay at your table. Okay? I don't know whether you've ever done this. Have you ever done speed dating? Well, I haven't. I haven't done speed dating. But at work, I work in a primary school in the office, and a few months back we had an event where the head teacher asked that all the staff would stay behind, and the governors of the school were to come and we were going to do speed dating with the governors. And I'm thinking, what on earth? Anyway, what it really was, we went into the school hall and it's all tables, all spread out with a governor at each table. And so it was really to get to know the governors, because we've got some new governors who we really weren't very familiar with. And so we had speed dating with the governors. So we went in groups of three or four, and sat down at a table, and you had about 5 minutes to talk, to introduce yourself, to say who you were, and to ask the governor any questions, or the governors could ask us questions. And then the head teacher would ring a bell. We'd have to move on to the next table. And so this went on, there's, maybe 7 tables or something. And so over a period of half an hour to an hour, we moved around these tables, getting to know each other. But we were unable to stay at one table for very long. Okay? You weren't allowed to get comfortable with that one particular governor. The bell went and we had to move on. Okay? Stay at your table. Don't speed date with tables. Stay where God's planted you. Okay? In Genesis 43, verse 32, there's a story told about Joseph. Now, we all know the story about Joseph and his coat of many colours and how he was taken away to Egypt. The story in Genesis 43, verse 32, brings you to a point where he was separated from his brothers and he's reunited with them. Okay? And it says in verse 32, Joseph invited his brothers to a feast at the palace. They were unaware that, now that's what it says, Joseph was invited his brothers to a feast at the palace. Now then, they were unaware that Pharaoh had put Joseph in charge of Egypt. He was really high up. He'd gone from just the young boy to being in charge of Egypt. And verse 32 says this, the waiters served Joseph at his own table. Right? That's the bit I want you to know. His own table. So this is Genesis 43, verse 32. And his brothers were served at a different or a separate table. Joseph told his brothers where to sit. So Joseph was with his brothers, but he was sat at his own table. Stay at your table, okay? Stay seated in the place, in the seat, at the table where God has placed you, where you were planted. You know, when you fly on an aeroplane, generally the aeroplanes that we've flown on are big jumbo jet things, and so you're seated in 3, then 4, then 3, and we always try to get toward like a window seat, where there's a window seat. Now when our children were a bit younger, Grace being the youngest one, she always wanted to sit at the window seat, and she just loves everything about flying, everything about it, you know. Our middle one, Hannah, not so much. In fact, she hates everything about flying, right? But a few years ago, she came on holiday with us, and for some silly reason, insisted that she wanted to sit at the window seat. Okay, so we got on, and Grace was saying, but I like to sit at the window seat, and Hannah was saying, well, just let me for this one. So Grace did, and she let Hannah sit there, and so the announcements are given, and seat belts fastened, and the signs on, fasten your seat belt, and when that sign goes on, you don't open your seat belt and you don't move, unless you're called Hannah and you're terrified of flying. And so she decided all of a sudden, as we were starting to just take off, she no longer wanted to sit at the window seat. She wanted to get out. So she's trying to undo her seatbelt. Well, an alarm goes off. If you take your bleep, 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 if you're taking your seatbelt off and somebody comes running to say, what's the problem? Fasten your seatbelt. She was terrified and decided she didn't want to stay in this seat. And so we couldn't do a thing. I'm trying to stop her. I mean, she's an adult by this time, and she's just taking her seatbelt off, panicking. And so quickly, Grace had to undo her seatbelt, swap seats, and she settled a little bit, because she wasn't at the window and she couldn't see out and she didn't want to know what was happening. Don't do that. Stay at your seat. Don't undo your seatbelt. Don't jump ship prematurely. Stay at your table, okay? Stay and remain faithful to the place that God has put you, that he's planted you. And just finally, church, just want to give you 4 little quick bullet points. Okay. First of all, number 1, don't envy or want somebody else's table. It's easy to do, isn't it? You always think, oh, that table's better than my table. No, God's put you at your table for a reason. Okay. Number 2, God has prepared your table just for you. Number 3, your table is unique. It's nobody else's table, it's your table. It might not look like the table next door. It might not look like the table across there. That's because it's unique to you. So stay at your table. Because do you know what? Number 4, you have the best seat in the house. You have the window table. Because God is sat at that table, at that seat, right with you. Okay, church? That's it. I just want to say thanks for tuning in today. And next week we should be back live in person, 11 o'clock next Sunday at the Royal Keys Community Centre. We'll see you then.